All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into the wild world of global finance.
It's a real roller coaster out there, that's for sure.
We're talking El Salvador, Singapore, Morocco.
Even the BRICS nations and their crypto
It's
moves.
a lot to cover, but that's what we do here.
We try to make sense of it all.
And we've got some really interesting sources for this deep dive.
Financial news, of course.
But also a blog post that's, let's just say, it doesn't hold back.
Yeah, some strong opinions in that one.
Plus, a couple of in-depth reports that really get into the nitty-gritty.
Think of it as a backstage pass to the global money show.
All the drama, all the intrigue.
Absolutely.
Okay, so first stop on our world tour, El Salvador.
Remember back in 2021 when they made that big splash, adopting Bitcoin as legal tender?
Yeah, it was a pretty bold move.
It was, and now it seems like the honeymoon phase might be over.
Hitting the brakes on Bitcoin.
More like slamming on the brakes.
What happened?
Well, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is at the door with a $1.4 billion loan.
Ah, so there's strings attached.
There are always strings attached.
So what does the IMF want El Salvador to do?
A lot, actually.
Like what?
Well, for starters, they want El Salvador to reduce its debt, get it down to 85% of their GDP.
That's a pretty big ask.
It is, and they also want more transparency, especially when it comes to those digital assets.
So basically, the IMF is saying, we'll give you this loan, but you have to play by our rules.
Exactly, and one of those rules is, well, Bitcoin's still technically legal tender, but using it will be severely restricted.
So no more paying taxes with Bitcoin.
Nope.
And businesses don't have to accept it either.
Right.
Wow, so Bitcoin's still allowed, but they've basically sent it to its room with no dinner.
Pretty much.
So is this the end of El Salvador's Bitcoin experiment?
That's the big question.
And what does this say about the IMF's stance on cryptocurrencies in general?
That's another question worth pondering.
Okay, moving on.
Next stop, Singapore.
Talk about a different vibe.
While El Salvador's been on that Bitcoin roller coaster, Singapore has been the picture of stability.
Their financial system is known for being rock solid.
Rock solid.
The Singapore dollar, or SGD as it's known in the financial world.
It's often called a defensive currency in Asia.
What does that mean, defensive currency?
Basically, it means that even when global markets get a little shaky, the SGD tends to hold steady.
Oh, so it's like a safe haven.
Kind of, yeah.
And their monetary policy, it's a little different, right?
It is. They don't rely on interest rates like most other countries.
What do they use instead?
They focus on managing the exchange rate.
So how does that work?
The Monetary Authority of Singapore, or MAS, they're constantly adjusting the value of the SGD against a basket of other currencies.
So they're like a financial juggler keeping all the balls in the air?
You could say that, yeah.
So where does crypto fit into all of this?
That's a good question.
Singapore has a reputation for being open to innovation.
They do, and they're definitely warming up to cryptocurrencies.
It's like cautiously.
Cautiously, yes.
Give me an example.
Well, DBS Bank, one of the biggest banks in the region, they're rolling out crypto trading for their wealthy clients.
Okay, so they're dipping their toes in the water.
Dipping their toes, yeah.
But it's not a free-for-all, right?
No, the MAS is very clear about that.
What's their approach?
They call it risk-adjusted regulation.
So they want to foster innovation.
But without letting things get out of control?
A balancing act.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm ready for our next destination.
How about Morocco?
Oh, this one's interesting.
This is where things get a little strange.
The government suddenly demands citizens hand over their euros.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of a movie.
So what happened?
The Moroccan government gave its citizens a 7-day ultimatum.
7 days to do what?
To deposit all their euros and other foreign currencies into banks.
And if they didn't?
Penalties.
Serious penalties.
Apparently so.
That's pretty drastic.
And it is, and it caused quite a stir.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Why would they do that?
Yeah. Well, some people are saying it's a sign of trouble.
Like maybe the central bank is running low on foreign reserves.
And they needed a quick fix.
Possibly.
There's also a lot of talk about gold.
Yeah, there seems to be a gold rush happening in Morocco right now.
People are nervous.
They're looking for a safe haven.
And gold has always been seen as a safe haven.
It has.
So this surge in demand for gold could be putting pressure on the central bank.
To beef up their own gold reserves.
Which would require more foreign currency.
Exact.
Some are even comparing this to Roosevelt's gold confiscation back in 1933 in the U.S.
It's a provocative comparison, that's for sure.
It really highlights that tension that can exist between governments, central banks, and citizens.
When it comes to control over money.
It's a power struggle.
It always has been.
So we've got El Salvador doing the Bitcoin shuffle, Singapore carefully navigating the crypto waters.
And Morocco making a power move with this Euro decree.
The global financial landscape is definitely anything but boring these days.
And we're just getting started.
I know, right? Now let's zoom out and take a look at the BRICS nations.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Like a crypto kaleidoscope over there.
Every country with its own unique approach.
Let's break it down.
All right, first up, Russia.
Okay, what are they up to?
They've legalized crypto for international transactions.
But not for domestic payments yet.
Right, so they're dipping their toes in the water, but they're not ready to dive in just yet.
Interesting strategy.
And get this, they're even thinking about launching a state-backed crypto exchange.
Wow. Government control taken to a whole new level.
It seems so, doesn't it?
What about India? They've been going back and forth on crypto for a while now.
They have. Initially, they were leaning towards a ban.
A complete ban.
Yeah, but lately, they've been softening their stance.
So what are they doing now?
They're moving towards a more nuanced regulatory framework.
Okay, so they're trying to find a middle ground.
They are. They're focusing on taxation.
Makes sense.
And they're also developing their own central bank digital currency.
A CBDC, as they're called.
Right. Theirs is called the digital rupee.
So they're not giving up on the idea of a digital currency.
Not at all. They just want to make sure they're in control.
Speaking of CBDCs, we have to talk about China.
They've been charging ahead with their digital yuan.
They're way ahead of the game.
They are. They've been running trials in major cities.
And it seems like people are actually using it.
They are, for everyday transactions.
Like what?
Buying groceries, paying bills, even receiving salaries.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is. And all this while, they're still maintaining restrictions on private cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin.
So it's our digital currency, our rules situation over there.
Pretty much.
What about the other two BRICS members? Brazil and South Africa.
Well, Brazil has taken a more open-door policy.
They've legalized crypto as a payment method.
Yep, and they're encouraging blockchain startups.
They're embracing the technology.
They are.
South Africa's taking a more cautious approach.
They're focusing on regulating financial institutions that deal with crypto.
So they want to make sure everything is above board.
Exactly.
So many different approaches to crypto.
It's a global experiment, and we're all watching to see what happens next.
It's fascinating and a little bit nerve-wracking.
I agree, but that's what makes it so interesting.
And on that note, let's turn our attention to a really interesting development.
Involving China and the US dollar.
This one's a bit of a head-scratcher.
China's been making waves in the financial world.
And the US dollar's right in the middle of it.
So here's the story. China issued US dollar-denominated bonds.
Okay, that's not unusual.
But they issued them in Saudi Arabia.
That is unusual.
And here's what's really interesting. They got interest rates that were almost as good as US Treasury bonds.
So basically, China can borrow US dollars almost as easily as the US government itself.
Exactly, and that's a pretty big deal.
Why Saudi Arabia, though?
That's the question everyone's asking.
Some are saying it's a symbolic move.
A challenge to the petrodollar system.
So what happens if China starts doing this on a larger scale?
That's the big question.
Could it shake the foundations of the US dollar's dominance?
Possible.
That would be a major shift in the global financial order.
It would be, and it's something we need to keep a close eye on.
So much to think about.
And we're only just getting started.
I know, it's a lot to take in, but this is why we do this.
We want to help people understand what's happening in the world of finance.
And how it might affect their lives.
Oh, exactly.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into these trends and explore what they mean for the future of money.
Stay tuned.
And we're back, folks, ready to plunge even deeper into the fascinating world of global finance.
Yeah, that last segment about China issuing those US dollar bonds
In Saudi Arabia, of all places.
really got me thinking.
Me too. It's like watching a high-stakes poker game unfold.
With the world's biggest economies holding all the cards.
But before we get too lost in speculation, let's take a step back.
And look at the bigger picture.
What are the big themes that have emerged from our discussion so far?
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is just the sheer variety of approaches to cryptocurrency.
It's like a global patchwork quilt.
Every country stitching together its own unique design.
You've got El Salvador, who went all in on Bitcoin, only to face a reality check from the IMF.
Then there's Singapore, taking a much more cautious approach with their risk-adjusted framework.
And the BRICS nations. It's a real mix and match of experimentation and regulation over there.
It's like a real-time laboratory for the future of finance.
with each country running its own experiment.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to observe how these different approaches are playing out.
There's no clear winner yet, which suggests that the best path forward might be a blend of strategies.
Tailored to each country's unique circumstances.
Speaking of unique circumstances, let's circle back to Morocco and that Euro ultimatum.
Oh, yeah, that was a wild one.
It really highlights the fragility of trust in traditional financial systems.
When a government feels compelled to take such drastic measures, it can send shockwaves through the entire system.
Makes you wonder what other actions governments might be tempted to take when they're facing economic pressure.
It's a stark reminder that the control of money, whether it's physical cash or digital assets, is often at the heart of power struggles.
Not just between nations, but within them as well.
Absolutely. And it's not just governments vying for control.
Central banks are major players in this evolving landscape too.
We touched on central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, earlier.
It seems like every central bank on the planet is at least exploring the concept.
It's like a digital arms race.
Everyone trying to figure out how to maintain control of monetary policy in a world where digital currencies are gaining traction.
And the stakes are incredibly high.
How these CBDCs are designed and implemented could have huge implications for things like privacy, financial inclusion.
Even the stability of the entire global financial system.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but that's why we do what we do.
To help our listeners navigate this complex and ever-changing world of finance.
Exactly. We want to equip you with the knowledge and the tools you need to make informed decisions.
And maybe even spot those emerging trends before they hit the mainstream.
So let's zoom out even further for a moment.
What are some of the key takeaways from our discussion so far?
What are the big picture themes that our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, one overarching theme that's hard to ignore is the shifting balance of financial power on a global scale.
The old guard, dominated by the US dollar and Western institutions, is facing some serious competition.
Yeah, that story about China issuing those dollar-denominated bonds really drove that point home.
It's like the tectonic plates of global finance are shifting beneath our feet.
And there are multiple forces driving this shift.
You've got the rise of new economic powerhouses like China, the growing acceptance of cryptocurrencies.
And a growing wave of skepticism toward traditional financial institutions.
It's a complex and dynamic process, but it's likely to continue reshaping the global financial landscape for years to come.
So what does this mean for the average person?
How can we prepare for this uncertain financial future?
That's the million-dollar question.
I think one of the most important things we can do is to stay informed.
Don't just blindly trust the experts or take the headlines at face value.
Do your own research, think critically, and form your own opinions.
It's more important than ever to be financially savvy.
And never underestimate the power of diversification.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Explore different asset classes, look into alternative investment options.
Be open to thinking outside the traditional financial playbook.
It's about being adaptable and resilient in a world where change is the only constant.
Well said. And speaking of adaptability, let's dive back into our source material.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there are still some intriguing nuggets of information to unpack.
Okay, where to next?
Let's revisit El Salvador's Bitcoin journey.
What about it?
Remember that IMF loan we discussed? Well, there's some interesting fine print in that agreement that's worth exploring.
Oh, I love a good deep dive into the details.
It turns out the IMF isn't just demanding fiscal reforms, they're also pushing El Salvador to be much more transparent about their Bitcoin dealings.
So what do they want?
They want the government to disclose all its Bitcoin purchases, holdings, and transactions.
Really?
Yeah, it's like they're saying, show us the receipts.
That's a pretty big ask, isn't it?
It is, especially for governments.
They're not exactly known for their openness when it comes to their financial moves.
But it suggests the IMF is keeping a very close eye on El Salvador's Bitcoin experiment.
Trying to set a precedent, perhaps?
Maybe it'll be interesting to see how this situation unfolds.
And whether other countries follow suit.
Speaking of other countries, what about Singapore?
They're often seen as pioneers in the financial technology world.
They are, and they're doing some interesting things in the crypto space.
Like what?
Well, we mentioned earlier that DBS Bank is expanding its crypto trading services.
Right.
But they're also developing a blockchain-based platform for trading carbon credits.
Whoa, that sounds pretty cool.
It is. The idea is to create a more efficient and transparent marketplace for carbon credits.
Using blockchain technology,
Exactly, to track and verify those credits.
making it much harder to cheat or game the system.
Exactly.
That's a brilliant application of blockchain technology.
It is. It's a good reminder that while cryptocurrencies often dominate the headlines,
The underlying technology has the potential to transform a wide range of industries.
from finance to healthcare to environmental protection.
Okay, so we've got El Salvador navigating the IMF's watchful gaze.
Singapore, quietly making waves in the carbon credit market.
What about Morocco? Any updates on that euro situation?
Well, it seems the government's ultimatum got people's attention.
How so?
Over 100 billion dirhams, that's roughly 10 billion euros, have flooded into Moroccan banks since the announcement.
Wow, so they got what they wanted.
At least in the short term, they've managed to replenish their foreign currency reserves.
But the long-term consequences remain to be seen,
It's possible this could erode trust in the banking system,
leading to more people hoarding foreign currencies.
or shifting their focus to alternative assets like gold.
It's a reminder that when governments intervene in the market so dramatically.
It can often create unintended consequences.
Okay, time for a quick recap.
El Salvador is under scrutiny, Singapore is innovating, and Morocco is dealing with the fallout from its euro decree.
What about the BRICS nations? Any new developments on their crypto adventures?
Actually, yes. Remember Russia's plan to launch a state-backed crypto exchange?
Yeah, they were talking about that.
Well, it seems they're moving full steam ahead.
Really?
They just announced a partnership with a major Russian bank to develop the platform.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is.
They are, and they're not alone. China is also stepping up its efforts to promote the digital yuan.
How so?
They've started offering discounts and rewards to incentivize people to use it.
So they're trying to make it more attractive.
Exactly. It's a gentle nudge to encourage adoption.
It's amazing to see how these different countries are approaching digital currencies,
It really is a global testing ground for the future of money.
underscoring that the story of money is still being written.
And we're all watching it unfold in real time.
Speaking of unfolding stories, we've got one more stop on our global tour.
We've talked about El Salvador, Singapore, Morocco, the BRICS nations. Where else should we explore?
I'm all ears.
Well, we've touched on China's activity in the US dollar bond market, but there's another fascinating angle to their financial strategy that deserves attention.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It involves their ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, often called the BRI.
The new Silk Road.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting from a financial perspective.
I am listening.
China isn't just building physical infrastructure, they're also creating a parallel financial system to support these projects.
A parallel financial system
Yes, they're setting up their own banks, investment funds, and payment systems.
that operate outside of the traditional Western-dominated financial system.
Exactly.
That's a bold move. What's the strategy behind that?
Well, for one thing, it allows them to sidestep Western sanctions and financial regulations.
Yeah, makes sense.
It also gives them greater control over how their BRI projects are financed.
Yeah.
It promotes the use of the yuan, China's currency, in international trade and finance.
So it's a strategic play to boost China's economic and geopolitical influence.
Precisely, and it's not going unnoticed.
Policymakers around the world are watching this very closely.
They are. The BRI has the potential to fundamentally reshape the global financial landscape.
Its impact is likely to be felt for decades to come. This is all getting very complex. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic.
You're right, the world of global finance is incredibly complex.
And constantly evolving.
But that's what makes it so captivating, isn't it?
It is, and it makes you realize just how much is going on beneath the surface.
The world of global finance is a dynamic and ever-changing landscape, full of surprises, challenges, and opportunities.
And it's a story that's far from over.
Well said, and on that note, we're going to take a quick break.
Stay with us, because when we come back, we'll explore what all of this means for you.
And how you can navigate this complex financial terrain.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It feels like we've been on this incredible journey today, circling the globe, exploring the ins and outs of the global financial system.
We have covered a lot of ground, that's for sure.
El Salvador's Bitcoin roller coaster.
Singapore's steady hand in the crypto world.
Morocco's surprising Euro maneuver.
The diverse approaches of the BRICS nations.
And then, of course, China's strategic moves in the global financial arena.
It's been a whirlwind of information.
A truly fascinating whirlwind, though.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive,
Let's distill some wisdom from all of this.
what are the big takeaways? What are the lessons we should all be learning from these financial currents we've explored?
One thing that really strikes me is that the control of money, whether it's traditional currencies or those new digital assets, it's still a major point of tension on the global stage.
We saw that playing out in El Salvador.
There's struggles with the IMF over Bitcoin.
Morocco's drastic measures to control those euros.
Even China's attempts to, challenge the dominance of the US dollar, it seems like everyone's trying to grab the reins in this new evolving monetary system.
Governments, central banks, individuals were all players in this. And with cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, it's like the lines are getting even blurrier.
It really is.
Cryptocurrencies, they were once this niche concept,
And now they're pushing their way into the mainstream.
challenging the old ideas of value, control, even sovereignty.
It feels like we're witnessing the birth of a new financial era.
One where the rules are still being written.
Exactly. And in the midst of all this uncertainty,
One thing's for sure, diversification is more important than ever.
couldn't agree more.
You've emphasized that throughout our conversation today.
And I think it bears repeating.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Whether it's a single currency or a single asset class, or even a single financial system, spreading your risk is essential.
Absolutely. Explore your options, stay informed, and be ready to adapt.
Flexibility and resilience, those are the keys in this new world.
Well said.
It's like being a financial explorer, right?
Yeah.
Navigating uncharted waters. You got to be resourceful, open-minded, and ready for anything.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of uncharted waters, that's where I'd like to leave our listeners today, with a question to ponder.
Okay, hit me with it. What's the question we should all be asking ourselves right now?
If the control of money really is shifting, if we're moving away from that old financial order, what role do you see for yourself in this time?
That's a big question. It's not just about, managing our own finances. It's about realizing we have a part to play in shaping the future of money itself.
Exactly. Will you just be swept along by the current? Or will you grab an oar and help steer the ship?
That's a choice we all have to make.
It is.
And it's a conversation we'll definitely keep having here on the Deep Dive as we continue to explore this fascinating, ever-changing world of global finance.
So stay curious, keep learning, and join us again next time as we dig even deeper.
Until then, fellow Deep Divers, keep exploring.